The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
All right, joining us now to discuss the crypto markets and more is CoinDesk Index's Managing Director, Jodie Gunzberg. Welcome to the show, Jodie. Great to have you. So when we take a look at ETH reaching an all-time high last night, over $4,600, what are some of the factors laid out? I see you have three institutional factors behind this record-breaking run for ETH.
Thanks for having me. And I speak with a lot of institutional investors. And now what I'm finding is after the massive wave of interest and investment in Bitcoin, they're understanding that they need to start diversifying away from the risk of Bitcoin alone. And as the digital assets grow into an asset class, they need more assets. And ETH is one that's captured everybody's attention, not just from its use cases, but that it fills all of the different capital asset classes that they look for. So while the volatility of ETH alone is actually higher than Bitcoin, investors have gotten paid for this risk. I know that you've said, take a look at the charts. The charts are so sky that when you pair them with other traditional assets, it makes everything else look like a flat line. So there is the investors that are getting paid for this risk, and the volatility tends to spike at different times. So they are diversifying by having both ETH and Bitcoin.
So, Jodie, that volatility though is on the upside. I mean, when you look at when you calculate a standard deviation, it doesn't matter if it's on the upside or downside, right? So if you see high volatility in this case, it tends to be to the positive. But one question I have is, recently at least, over the past few days, if not weeks, we hear about Shiba Inu. It's used on the Ethereum network. How much of this sort of meme coin interest has had an effect on ETH, on the fact that more ETH gets burned as the network uses more now because of the way things have changed in the network? How much of the meme coins has contributed, do you think, to the rise in ETH?
I don't know that I've seen evidence of that directly contributing to the rise of ETH, again, from the institutional perspective, where they're trying to put portfolios together and they're looking at really big macro pictures like rising inflation. Like, to me, I've heard so much more about institutions looking for the inflation hedge, and ETH provides that in a very direct and concentrated way, 3 times more than you get from Bitcoin. And it's about even 10 times out of oil, which is known for its ability to hedge inflation. So again, it's certainly a factor that may go into what's driving ETH. It's just that I think from the bigger lens and portfolio construction view, it's more about the volatility and the risk-adjusted returns.
I do want to ask you about this because your statement basically is that dollar weakness is a factor in why ETH is going up. But realistically, though, how much is it that people are saying, oh, well, gee, you know what, the Biden administration's spending, let's buy ETH? Or how much of it is just the fact that ETH has all this extra use case now? I mean, isn't it sort of are you making too much out of these macroeconomic factors playing a role into cryptocurrency compared to some of the more microeconomic factors that have to do with ETH itself?
When institutions are looking at the portfolio construction, the macro factors are major inputs to the way that they construct their portfolios. And any of the assets that are priced in US dollars do have a direct inverse relationship. So they do turn to things like commodities and ETH. And, you related to this in the burn rate. I mean, there's a consumable, transformable component of this that is filling that second spot in the major super asset class framework that's been so well known to these institutions. So I don't think I'm putting too much emphasis on the macro. I think macro factors are largely what drives the asset allocations, and thinking about crypto as an asset class where Bitcoin is taking up, even over 60% of the large cap index, ETH is the next biggest thing with over a quarter of it. So it plays a really important role in getting access to what's going on in the asset class itself.
Jodie, so I just kind of want to follow up on that comment. A lot of ETH's growth is due to the fact that it is kind of the next biggest thing, right? People are just going down the market cap and saying, okay, Bitcoin, all right, Bitcoin's kind of expensive. It's, really exposed. Okay, ETH. But how much of it is the growth due to just that, like just that it's number two and people want to diversify? And how much of it is due to actually some of the different specific use cases of ETH? So Lawrence mentioned meme coins. You said you don't think that's a lot of it, but what, like maybe NFTs or, is there evidence that people are buying ETH significantly because of ETH specific reasons and not just because of diversification?
Well, I think that the more and more products that are coming to market are also driving the institutional adoption there. So even like with the mini futures contracts on ETH that are coming, all of this is putting in the framework for the institutions to be able to hedge their exposures with it. But when you think about the use cases, it's not that institutions aren't looking at that. They're just seeing it first from the differences coming through in the metrics, like in the correlations. While ETH and Bitcoin are correlated, they're not always highly correlated. And sometimes they're actually kind of only moderately correlated. So it's only through numbers like that where they might say, okay, why is this happening? But they do generally rely on more of the experts that are analysts in the particular things. It's almost like how they invest in equity by the S&P 500, but they know what stock number 352 is really doing.
Well, Jodie, so if they're looking for diversification from Bitcoin and looking to ETH, ETH now at all-time highs, what's the next ETH? What's the next coin that everyone will want to be investing in if they're going down the list?
Well, I'm not really sure the answer to that, but I think maybe Solana is. I've heard a lot about that was a new entry. So maybe that one, but don't quote me on that.
So why don't we see the kind of chatter around ETFs with regard to ETH as we do with Bitcoin? Obviously, Bitcoin having the futures ETF that just got launched, a couple of them hitting the market in the past few weeks, but we don't hear the same sort of, if that institutional interest is there, how come we're not seeing this idea of, okay, why don't we really go full on into it and also create a product that could be sold even for institutional and for retail, such as an ETF?
I think we're going in that direction. Again, ETH is still a lot smaller than Bitcoin is. Even in the index, Bitcoin's 3 times more than ETH, so it's just not there yet. But even in the products that have been launched, I mean, this Bitcoin futures ETF, it's not really something that any institution who's looking at what they're doing would be buying because it's not a product structurally. Will I expect the same thing to get launched in ETH? Probably. But I think you can just go buy the asset that institutions need to get more comfortable with is product that allows them to buy the spot.
Jodie, could you just talk about specifically how much you think the NFT boom is feeding into into ETH growth? Do you have a sense of that?
I don't, not from the lens where I sit. It's hard for me to measure what that impact is. But again, I can actually see ETH being like the core of a core satellite crypto portfolio because of this special quality. I mean, this is like an asset that we've never seen where it is a capital asset, a consumable and transformable asset, and a store of value. That's completely unique. And if this is the case for ETH, it could really stake out the core of the crypto portfolio. And then you can just have different coins around that filling the different buckets that institutions require.